You know that. And he's very happy because I think he just broke a record. For as the Bible teaches us, there is no greater act of love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Ryan laid down his life for his friends, for his country, and for our freedom, and we will never forget Ryan. To those allies who wonder what kind of a friend America will be, look no further than the heroes who wear our uniform. Our foreign policy calls for a direct, robust, and meaningful engagement with the world. It is American leadership based on vital security interests that we share with our allies all across the globe. We strongly support NATO, an alliance forged through the bonds of 2 world wars that dethroned fascism and the Cold War and defeated communism. But our partners must meet their financial obligations. And now, based on our very strong and frank discussions, they are beginning to do just that. In fact, I can tell you the money is pouring in. Very nice. Very nice. We expect our partners, whether in NATO, the Middle East, or in the Pacific, to take a direct and meaningful role in both strategic and military operations and pay their fair share of the cost, have to do that. We will respect historic institutions, but we will respect the foreign rights of all nations, and they have to respect our rights as a nation also. Free nations are the best vehicle for expressing the will of the people, and America respects the right of all nations to chart their own path. My job is not to represent the world. My job is to represent the United States of America. But we know that America is better off when there is less conflict, not more. We must learn from the mistakes of the past. We have seen the war and the destruction that have ravaged and raged throughout the world, all across the world. The only long-term solution for these humanitarian disasters, in many cases, is to create the conditions where displaced persons can safely return home and begin the long, long process of rebuilding. America is willing to find new friends and to forge new partnerships where shared interests align. We want harmony and stability, not war and conflict. We want peace wherever peace can be found. America is friends today with former enemies. Some of our closest allies decades ago fought on the opposite side of these terrible, terrible wars. This history should give us all faith in the possibilities for a better world. Hopefully, the 250th year for America will see a world that is more peaceful, more just, and more free. On our 100th anniversary in 1876, citizens from across our nation came to Philadelphia to celebrate America's centennial. At that celebration, the country's builders and artists and inventors showed off their wonderful creations. Alexander Graham Bell displayed his telephone for the first time. Remington unveiled the first typewriter. An early attempt was made at electric light. Thomas Edison showed an automatic telegraph and an electric pen. Imagine the wonders our country could know in America's 250th year. Think of the marvels we can achieve if we simply set free the dreams of our people. Cures to the illnesses that have always plagued us are not too much to hope. American footprints on distant worlds are not too big a dream. Millions lifted from welfare to work is not too much to expect. And streets where mothers are safe from fear, schools where children learn in peace, and jobs where Americans prosper and grow are not too much to ask. When we have all of this, we will have made America greater than ever before. For all Americans, this is our vision. This is our mission, but we can only get there together. We are one people with one destiny. We all bleed the same blood. We all salute the same great American flag. And we all are made by the same God. When we fulfill this vision, when we celebrate our 250 years of glorious freedom, we will look back on tonight as when this new chapter of American greatness began. The time for small thinking is over. The time for trivial fights is behind us. We just need the courage to share the dreams that fill our hearts, the bravery to express the hopes that stir our souls, and the confidence to turn those hopes and those dreams into action. From now on, America will be empowered by our aspirations, not burdened by our fears, inspired by the future, not bound by failures of the past, and guided by a vision, not blinded by our doubts. I am asking all citizens to embrace this renewal of the American spirit. I am asking all members of Congress to join me in dreaming big and bold and daring things for our country. I am asking everyone watching tonight to seize this moment, believe in yourselves, believe in your future, and believe once more in America. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States.
The President of the United States delivering an important, powerful speech. His tone clearly different than the speech he delivered at the inauguration. The President going through a whole range of issues. His tone, Jake Tapper, clearly less insightful, shall we say, than it was then.
Yeah, it was a much more subdued President Trump than we've seen. He stuck, for the most part, 95% to the teleprompter and the words that had been written for him, with him, by his speechwriters. It was a speech in which he clearly was trying to reset in a lot of ways, both tonally. He started the speech with a strong condemnation of hate crimes against an Indian man in Kansas last week, as well as threats that we've seen at Jewish community centers and Jewish day schools. He called those acts hate and evil, said there were policies on which we disagree, but we all unite against that hate and evil. And he talked about the time for small thinking is over, the time for trivial fights is behind us. Now that was the wrapping in which he presented the policy. Now, when it comes to this call for unity, there are going to be a lot of people who take issue with a lot of these proposals. There is a clear America First nationalistic undercurrent to a lot of the things he talked about today. He talked about a total revamp of our immigration system, shifting to one that instead of taking in refugees, taking in people from around the world who want to try to realize the American dream, specifically to have a more self-interested immigration policy, one based on bringing in people of higher skill. He talked about how his job is not to be representative of the world. His job is to be president of the United States and represent the United States. And then at the one time that we heard boos during the speech, he talked about a special office to be set up, I think in the Department of Homeland Security, VOICE, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement, a special office for people who have been, either they or their family members, victimized by people who are in this country illegally, and he reached out and introduced the nation to a few of these individuals, many of whom people who have been following the campaign or who know President Trump's campaign speech as well will recognize some of these people. I guess what I'm saying there is his tone might have been one thing, but a lot of people in that chamber, Democrats especially, but also some moderate Republicans, are going to find issues there that's not so unifying. On the issue of Obamacare, was very interesting. He made a full embrace of what House Republicans have been pushing and the basic outlines of the Speaker Ryan plan, especially talking about the tax credits for those people who can't afford health insurance. That's something that conservatives have expressed concern about, saying it might be a new entitlement, but the president gave support to it today. That was a big hug to Paul Ryan.
He's now emerging. He's walking out of the House of Representatives. He's signing some autographs as he leaves the chamber. Dana, your thoughts?
This was, for Donald Trump, kind of the best of the stump speeches, the issues that resonated the most, that really helped get the voters to the polls so that he would win, but delivered in the most presidential of manners that we have heard from Donald Trump to date, period. Much more so even than, and especially I would say, than his inaugural address. To Jake's point, he clearly is trying to reset here, but when you look at the issues, he is trying to be true to the people who sent him to Washington, starting with some of the things that he promised that he was going to do, that he did by executive order, like the lobbying ban and so forth. But immigration, terrorism, trade, and then, of course, the whole notion of the fact that he believes that America needs a president who focuses on them first. Not only saying that he's going to lead America and is not responsible for the world, but also giving a very nationalistic, isolationist and protectionist tone. Again, that really resonated with the people who voted for him and is in keeping with the people, Steve Bannon, for example, who have written and even made documentaries about these issues and are now seeing a vehicle in which to push it in the President of the United States.
Just one other note, which is, I wouldn't exactly call this a speech focused tremendously on foreign policy. You didn't really hear much about it other than the task of defeating the savages of ISIS. And using the term radical Islamic terrorism, which, by the way, his National Security Advisor, General McMaster, recommended that he not use. It was a very American-centric speech, which is not a surprise, of course. Make America great again, America first are his mottos. But we did not hear the words Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria. We have more than 10,000 U.S. troops in those three countries. We did not hear, this is not a surprise, but we did not hear the word Russia, which has been a big part of his foreign policy pitch on the stump. Wouldn't you like to get along with Russia? Although more controversial today, although there was an allusion to making common cause with former folks.
And I would just add to that, Jake, that not only was there not a lot on the traditional foreign policy discussion, it was just the opposite. He made very clear, I think, in the absence of that, and also explicitly said, basically, we're going to retreat. It's all about us.
Anderson is with us, of course. Anderson, he delivered so many of the promises he made during the campaign, but he read that speech from that teleprompter much more effectively than he has in the past.
Yeah, for somebody who a teleprompter is a relatively new thing for him, this was probably, without a doubt, one of his best speeches that I've ever heard. And I think emotionally, that moment where he's speaking to Karen Owens, the widow of William Ryan Owens, Navy SEAL, who was killed in that operation in Yemen, probably, I mean, it was without a doubt one of the most kind of emotional moments we have seen in a political speech like this in quite some time. John King, what did you hear tonight?
That was an incredibly powerful moment, A, because the story is so compelling, but B, also proof that this president understands the theater of politics, understands to make a point. It helps to have moments like that, and you couldn't help but just get tearing up yourself as you watch that play out. Consider where he began. He stepped on that rostrum tonight as the least popular president at this point in his presidency in modern history since Ronald Reagan anyway. This will help him. He will get a bounce out of this speech. He spent more than an hour talking to the American people. A lot of it was about jobs. A lot of it was about security. If you're a Trump opponent, there's plenty to disagree with. His tone on immigration, his talk about, reinstituting some sort of a travel ban soon. There's plenty to disagree with. But the way he talked, his delivery was much better. He is learning that, the way he addressed the American people. But it's also proof of how different he is. Yes, he had fidelity to his big campaign promises, and the Democrats mostly sat there as he went through them on immigration and other things. But he talked about, withdrawing from trade agreements, and the Speaker, Paul Ryan, kind of sat there quietly at that moment because that's not a free market Republican. He talked about $1 trillion in infrastructure, some of that with private money, not all government money, but that's not a Republican idea. A lot of what he proposed is government action, using the levers of government to influence the economy. That's not a free market conservative. So this was a speech that will help him with his voters and his base, but it was a reminder that this is a very different president, and going forward, now he has to deliver a lot of big promises there. Eliminate ISIS, create all these jobs, do all these things. So this sets the groundwork, and it was a good speech for the president. It will help the president in the short term. The problem is, we have it. And so 6 months from a year from now, we can go through the checklist, and now he has to deliver.
But, the tone was talked about a lot during the campaign. I mean, the tonal difference between that President Trump and the President Trump on Twitter at 5 a.m. in the morning, it's like a completely different person.
And in some ways, he's seemed to be weaning himself off of Twitter over the last couple of days.
Hour.
Right. And yeah, I mean, he was serious. I mean, in some ways, I think the environment imposes that on you. I mean, when you're sitting there with all of those folks, people from Congress, people from his cabinet, you can't be anything but serious and sober. And we saw that. And we saw him sometimes go into his superlative talk about, and get off script a little bit, but he was on script mostly, and I think in some ways there's something for everybody in this speech, which is in some ways a problem because he talked about funding, for instance, and the only funding he talked about really was for the military and for veterans. But then when he talks about, for instance, Chicago, nothing there in terms of a real plan. He just said the violence there is unacceptable. He's been president for 30 or 40 days or so, hasn't gone to Chicago. I don't think he's even reached out to the governor there, but that's something he likes to talk about all the time. So, I mean, I think the problem still remains, which is he's got a divided Democratic Party, as you talked about, and a divided Republican Party.
By the way, on Chicago, the city has a request for various things sitting at the Justice Department waiting for the administration to act. But look, if I'm the Trump team, I'm very, very happy with this speech. He went in there with a mind to reset, and he wanted to eliminate this notion of chaos. He wanted to burnish those things that he claims as accomplishments, and he wanted to get back to those basic themes and big goals that got him to where he is today. I agree with John, though, that the challenge is when the rubber hits the road, because on a lot of these issues that he detailed tonight, there isn't even agreement among Republicans on how to proceed. So I think that there will be an afterglow from this speech. He should get a bump in the polls, but I learned in my own experience that those things are very fleeting, and ultimately you've got to produce on the things that you're talking about, or the memory of the speech will fade.
As we were saying, Trump plays to the audience, and this was a conventional speech playing to a conventional audience.